All right, welcome back. This is the Universal Life Podcast, and I'm your host, Ben Colbert, and this is episode number 10. And a couple days ago, I posted episode number 9, which was basically a 2-minute and 50-second promo for my new book, The Art of Coaching, which you see right here on the wall over here, and that is available on universallife.com. You just can go there and you can go to the shop and download it if you like. Take a look. It is my first book, and it took me, probably about 4 months to piece all that together and do all the graphics for it and everything. So a lot of time and love went into it. And if you'd like to, you can go support the Universal Life cause and download it and take a look and add it to your library. Today, we're going to switch gears and we're going to try to dive a little bit deeper into some content. And one of the other episodes that I've recorded, I think it was episode 8 maybe, on actually 7. It was curiosity is what I was talking about. I was teaching on what role that plays in our life and how to be curious. And as I've gotten older and experienced more things, became a dad, tried to set out on this creative journey in terms of writing, creating books, hosting a podcast, things like that, creating a blog. Curiosity has been a major theme in my life, like being curious about something and pursuing it and chasing after it and not letting up, and then you have seasons where you come upon things that you're pursuing and life events happen and you like that thing that you're studying or you're going after takes a back seat for a little bit, but then do you come back to it? Do you keep pursuing it? Do you stay curious about whatever it is that you wanted to look for in the first place? It's like a gravitational pull. Is it pulling you back? So I don't always sit here and do podcast episodes. I'm trying to get organized where I can consistently do this. A lot of my time went into writing since about December and creating a book. So trying not to have too many distractions or limiting your distractions so you can stay curious about whatever it is you like and keep pursuing it until you become good at it, or you become knowledgeable in that space, or maybe one day you try to become an expert in that space. So that's what I was really trying to get at is, are you curious? And if you're not, try to figure out whatever it is that you're curious about. You start pursuing it, and we can go on about that as well for a while. But today, I wanted to talk about something a little bit relatable to curiosity. Whenever curiosity exists, there's another piece that comes into play that like creeps up on you a little bit, and that's what's called fear. And we all have fear in some capacity. We all experience fear and have experienced fear at some point in our life. And I wanted to talk on it a little bit. It's a subject that I've studied, I would say, over the past 6 to 7 years. Anytime I come upon content of somebody talking on fear, my ears perk up and I'm like drawn to it. I'm like, what does this person have to say about fear? So I start taking notes, and I think it comes down to just the psychology part of it, like how does the mind or the individual operate day to day when things come upon them that like makes them a little bit scared, whatever that looks like. And I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper of what some great examples of what fear is, especially on this episode. I'm going to define fear. I want to basically pull back the veil of what it actually is and maybe the misconceptions that are around it. And I think everybody might have their own definition of what fear is to them. So I'm going to rattle off some talking points here and see if any of it is relatable to you. So we'll unpack that. And then in another episode, so we'll do like a little series here, we'll talk about like how to harness fear. Those fears that you have, what are some things that you can do to overcome the fear? Tools, if you will. Like if you had a tool belt, This is my fear tool belt. Whenever this moment creeps up on me, what am I going to do to react, to respond so I can overcome it? So, episode 10. And I'm a little bit confused because for whatever reason, I wrote episode 9 down when this is actually episode 10. So I had episode 8, and now it went to 9, but it's actually 10 on my notes. So I get sidetracked and a little bit out of whack. But nevertheless, here we are. This is episode 10, and we're fired up for it. So back to fear. Why I got consumed with this topic in the first place is because I was reading probably 6 to 7 years ago a terrific book. It's called The Motivation Manifesto, and that's by Brendon Burchard. I think I'm pronouncing that correct. And Brendon is basically a motivational speaker. He's a non-fiction book writer. And if you can look him up on Instagram or social media and follow his content. And he's like a life coach, is probably a good way to put it. And he has some phenomenal content. And what I found within his book, The Motivation Manifesto, he had a chapter that really struck me, and it was on fear. And it basically just framed the subject in a way that I had never thought about it. So from that point on, I, really started to dive a little bit deeper into it. So much so, after I read that book or that specific chapter, I started taking notes on that chapter because at the time I was coaching football, and week to week we would do virtues of the week, or like a coach would get up and present some type of information to the team that might be inspiring, a subject that might say, hey, this can help you through these types of situations. In team camp, we may have a special guest speaker talk on certain topics. Well, after reading that chapter, I started to piece together this presentation. It was on fear, and a lot of that information I plucked or pulled from his book called The Motivation Manifesto. So it's a little bit of a shout out to him. So I've extracted information from there, and I've also added on a lot of other things as well, as far as influences from other areas that I've sort of just packed it all together into things that I think can be helpful. It's definitely helpful to me, and that's a large part why I'm so passionate about it, is because when I study it more and more, I've added tools to my tool belt that help me in my day-to-day. And like anybody else, I'm fearful of all kinds of things. And so how do I react in specific situations? So let's define it as far as like what fear actually is. So fear, by definition, is just basically it's an unpleasant emotion. It's something that creeps up inside of you that it's like that fight or flight mechanism in you. It's just like, oh, something is occurring right now. I'm a little bit freaked out. It's that internal voice that says, stop, hold up, let's begin to back away from this moment to stay safe so we won't be harmed, we won't get hurt. Whether that's physical, whether that's mental, whether that's all kinds of different things, we want to retract from that moment so we can live, so we can, sustain life, if you will. We feel like we're having almost like a meltdown. So an unpleasant emotion that's caused by a belief that something is dangerous. An example of true fear might be like an attacking dog. Like if you've ever been face-to-face with a dog that clearly has bad intentions, like you just sense that energy from the dog and you're like, oh no, what do I do? Do you run? Do you jump the fence? You start to defend yourself. It's that fear just like overwhelms you at that moment. Something like a fear of mine is fear of heights, or maybe that's a phobia. They're sort of relatable. But like I can't get up close to an edge if I go hiking. Like I stay very clear of any type of heights. I don't know, it just makes me uneasy. That my internal voice starts going nuts when it just says, don't get near the cliff. I don't like the feeling. If there's a rail there, that's another thing. Like that talking voice doesn't surface as much. But it's just like when I get up on that edge and there's no barrier between me and that drop, I tend to freak out a little bit. Turbulence on an airplane, like if you're on an airplane, if you've ever been on one, and all of a sudden it just feels like the bottom drops out of the airplane. You drop real sudden, just like, oh no, the plane's going down, or it's like rattling, or it sounds like the engine's about to blow up. You're like, I'm not sure if this plane's going to stay in the air right now. Like, I've been in those situations, and I'm sure anybody that's ever been on an airplane has experienced turbulence or something weird, and you're like, I don't know if that's normal. And fear starts to creep in. Like, at no point do you just sit there like, oh, I'm good. This is all part of the experience. No, I get freaked out a little bit in those moments. Here's another one for me, fear. One of the most fearful moments of my life is when my 2-year-old fell down a flight of stairs, wooden flight of stairs, and I heard it from the other room. And in that moment, I knew it was my fault because I thought I closed the baby gate behind me, and she was behind me. And somehow it didn't latch, and she got through it, and I heard her fall. And you go in there, and you pick her up off the ground, and she's screaming. I've never been so scared in my entire life, to the point of tears. That is fear, knowing that you're responsible and you don't know if she's okay in that moment, and then you go through the whole experience of, we got to get her to the hospital, emergency room, and then you're just sitting there and waiting, knowing if she's okay or not. And like, ultimately she was fine, and thank goodness that she was. But like, in the experience, I've never been so scared in my life. I thought I, had hurt my little girl, and it's just, you just feel so helpless. But that is fear. That is ultimate fear of, your child getting hurt. And then there's some other ones as far as like if you've ever, like pointing a gun at somebody, or, and I've already mentioned falling to your death as far as like fears of heights. But either way, you start to get my point. Like, there's all kinds of different, like, true fear, all right? Things where you are protecting yourself or protecting another, like if you're responsible for another human being and they may be in trouble and you're responsible, that, in my mind, is a true fear. Like, I'm fearful sometimes when I sit down at the computer and I hit record. Is it what I'm going to say ring true? Am I going to be fluid when I speak into my microphone? Like, I'm fearful sometimes just doing this. I get better at it. I learn to harness it. But I'm going to go into like, overcoming like little voices that ultimately isn't, relevant at all. Like it's a little fear. I'm a little fearful at first, but once I get going, I'm good. And I think I've mentioned public speaking before, but that's one of the biggest phobias among us all, is getting up in front of a large group of people and speaking, and that is a fearful moment. I remember when I was first coaching and teaching, being fearful to stand in front of a group of students or a group of kids, and wondering if I think the judgment part, like what do people think of me? But then you get more comfortable with it, and you find that you get better at it, and you're able to overcome it. But bottom line, fear grips us. It's like a set of reins, like pulling you back, and like holding you from what it is that you might want to do. Or, maybe it's just the set of reins is like, hey, you need to pull back. You need to be safe in this exact moment. So in some cases, fear can torment you a little bit. Like, it overwhelms you, it consumes you, and it's like the only thing that you can think of. And it's at that point, is when you really need to try to discover some tools that can help you overcome the difficult times. So that, my friends, is what fear is. And and here's another like Webster dictionary version. It says fear is the human motive for aversion, like trying to get away from whatever it is that is bothering us. So Moving on here, we got fear's impact. Like, what does it do to us? When we talk about like the United States, one of the key words that comes to my mind is like we're a free country, we're a free state, we're free to be who we want to be, we're free to make the life that we want to make, which isn't the case in the rest of the world, in many parts of the world. So like we don't have this governing body over top of us. Sometimes we have or we implement unconsciously a governing body within ourselves. And what I mean by that is fear starts to talk to us and it rips us or it keeps us from ultimate freedom, from pursuing whatever it is that we want to do. So, for example, this podcast, like I want to record podcasts. I want to sit down and I want to share information. I want to provide information that I have learned that has been super helpful to others, because I feel like I have a gold mine of information here and I want to share it. I want the rest of the world to know it. But there are barriers some days that get in the way that keep me from doing that, whether it's time. Hey, I'm recording this podcast. I know I have to leave here in about 10 to 20 minutes. So I feel like I'm up against a time constraint. That could be a barrier for me to get over, and it's almost like keeping me from true freedom, from doing what I want to do. If you want to make an A in a class, what are the barriers or the fears that keep you from doing that? Is it judgment of like actually putting in the work, or like building a relationship with the teacher so you can actually ask good questions and talk day to day and like pick the teacher's brain and become like a mentee? There's all kinds of different examples, but fear rips us from our freedom is basically what I'm getting at. It's there's like a dictator within us that stops us from ultimately going after whatever it is we want to go after. So we try to, you gotta like come up with techniques to navigate around that talking head that keeps you from, the true freedom, that keeps you from whatever it is you want to be or whatever it is that you're wanting to do. Freedom to do whatever it is we truly want to do, or the internal voice that is speaking. So I'm just rattling off my note here. Let's see what else. Everybody, I see this all the time in the coaching profession. You'll have a conversation with an athlete or a kid, and it's like, Coach, I want to be great. I want to be the best. I want to start. I want to play a significant role. And that's great, and I want to say, absolutely, I'm on board with you. I'm going to give you the tools that you need to help get you there. And then the other component to that is you have to have the ability to overcome the moments where things don't get easy or that aren't easy. Fear is like one of the biggest destroyers of greatness. It's like a straitjacket that harnesses us and keeps us from like experiencing true joy, or keeps us from doing what we want to do. Like, players want to be great. I fully believe that. But then there's so many pieces that may not always be on the surface that they see, that they have to overcome to be great. Like, it's not about just walking into the weight room every day and doing the workout that's provided and then showing up to practice, and just going through the motions. It's so much more than that. It's taking on what I'm talking about today, as far as being able to overcome the mental obstacles that keep you from achieving the greatness piece. Being able to like get out of that straitjacket so you can just be free and attack and go after whatever it is that you want to be, and not be held back. So some other notes here. It says fear is the thief of humanity's light. I think that's so cool. And Brendon Burchard actually had that in his book, The Motivation Manifesto. Some of these notes are directly from there. But he says the fear is the thief of humanity's light. I feel like we all have this greatness within us, this spirit within us that we're not always able to let that light shine, because there is that fear piece that keeps us small. And it's our ability, the people that are good, the people that are great, the people that are just, killing it, are the ones that just can get over the hump. They figure it out. It's like they keep pushing, they're persistent, they don't let the voice have a voice. They know it's always going to be there, but they're able to get over it, and fight it, and have the tools to surpass it and reach, for greater heights, and not stay passive. They don't give it, legs. Fear, it doesn't help us to imagine our true greatness either. So going back to the player, they may not recognize how capable they truly are, because they may be fearful of, as far as leadership goes, they may be fearful of speaking out or teaching somebody because of the judgment piece. Like, they could reach greatness, but they would have to first get over the judgment or the fear of judgment. And fear doesn't help us commit to our higher aims. Is one of the finer points here. It doesn't help us to really push for the top, because it's keeping us held down. And that is a page being flipped there. I've got all my notes on paper, which, it's, if you can hear it, this is what I'm reading from here. But types of fear. So I was just mentioning a judgment from others, but it's a real type of fear. So we mentioned examples of real world fear. These are types of fear. So you have the fear of judgment, which is basically social moments. Like, what do other people think of us? Like, what are people going to think of me if I make a podcast? I don't know. I've had a lot of good feedback, like, hey, I've listened to your podcast, it's good, and things like that. But at first I was like, I don't know what people are going to think. But it got to a point, it's like, I'm not sure that it really matters, because I feel like I have something important to say, and I don't want to keep it to myself, and I think it's helpful. And I've shared it with students. I've shared it with teams over the years. And when I find that it helps people in the real world, I'm like, I need to share this with more. So I start setting this thing up and just going with it. And I think ultimately I feel I have the opportunity to help more people than people that may judge me for whatever reason. I don't know. Going back to the leadership part, it's hard to be a leader. And we've talked about this countless times to our teams. Hold on one second, my phone's ringing. We've talked about this topic all the time with every team that I've ever coached, how to be a leader. And it starts with being able to get over the fear of judgment. I think it's a social thing, and it's just fear operating. It's that voice inside of us, that dictatorship that steals us from our freedom. I know what to say here. I know what needs to be said. I know what needs to be done. Can you step out and just vocalize it? It'd be like, this is the way we're going to do it, and that's hard to get over. And you may not feel like you have the right voice for it, like the particular words to say. You may be fearful of articulating it the right way. But how can we get over that? And whenever a team is able to, and it's not just one person, it's multiple people supporting the others. If someone's attempting to lead, there has to be a first follower, which typically helps the person attempting to lead. The first person to support is like fuel. It's like ammunition for that that teammate that's trying like to push in the right direction. So if you see somebody leading, know that they're in a fearful state. Please help support them and be like, yes, I'm with you. Let's roll. If you believe in the cause, and hopefully you do. Like, it takes courage to step out because social oppression is a real thing. And if your team has more social oppressors on it, leadership doesn't exist, which leads to non-winning seasons. So, the fear of judgment, it's super real. And that's on teams. That's in the real workforce. It's everywhere. It's in a family, like, if you're wanting to lead your family in the right way, you got to be able to step out, and you got to have courage, and you got to say the right things, and you got to articulate and teach and inspire, and try to live well. And that's leading, and lead by example. But rejection is another thing. Rejection by others, but then the fear of rejection. Like, if you're trying to like get a promotion in your job, being fearful of rejection in that capacity. Like being self-oppressed is one way of putting it. Maybe like if I'm trying to go to my boss and I'm interested in maybe a new position that may pay well, like self-oppression would be the voice inside of me saying, he'll probably say no, which, how do I get away from that internal dialogue? Like, stop telling myself no. Like, I don't know if he's going to say yes or no. Like, go in there, talk, and speak passionately about what it is you want in a respectful manner and see what happens, and then you'll have more respect for yourself because you did it, and you'll know for certain, and then 9 times out of 10, they would typically give you advice like, hey, I see that you want this now. We'll see if we can make it happen for you. They may not say yes at that moment, but you may get a plan put in place to help you get a yes down the road. So there's good that could come from it. Just don't put the straitjacket on yourself and never go in the first place because you're self-oppressing. You're holding yourself down because it's that internal voice keeping you at bay. Let's see what else here. Here's a good quote from the book of the Motivation Manifesto. It says, "We fuel fear with small thoughts that betray our magnitude," which I think is wonderful. Magnitude, greatness, the thoughts we like. It's like little drops of water on the forehead of like, if we have this greatness inside of us, but we'll fuel us, like we'll keep ourselves at bay with just little eroding thoughts that keep us small. Like, how do we overcome that? Which is very interesting, and it's worth pursuing and figuring out how to dominate the internal conversation. So I think I'm going to wrap things up right there. I'm going to leave it there, and we're going to come back with an episode 11 because I think I've covered a lot of ground thus far. But yeah, this is an intro to fear, and I've got a lot more to say and to unpack here. But, what does that look like for you? And it's something to contemplate for the next episode of, where are we going to go as far as like, what are some strategies that we can implement to overcome that internal voice that keeps us from doing whatever it is that we want to do. Have courage. Courage and fear are combative. They combat one another. It's like good and evil. There are good versions of fear that keep us safe. I think that that needs to be said, and that's absolutely true. But there are versions of fear that keep us from achieving whatever it is we ultimately want to do for the good. So, thanks for listening in today. And if you haven't, go over to YouTube and subscribe. You can maybe even like this episode. You can hit the like button. But if you do that, that's definitely showing us some support. You can go to Apple Podcast as well and do the same. We're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, things like that. So whatever you're listening to us on, please hit the subscribe button, leave us a review, or leave me a review, and that'll keep the show pumping on. So thanks for being with us today. Can't wait for the next episode, and have a great day. Keep moving forward.